The other weekend, I was talking with somebody about just like sort of random game stuff, and the thing that came up was that said that one of the best advice that he read was advice about basically how don't roll unless failure is interesting. You know, something we mentioned fate and something. I mean, honestly, it's like, is it the year 2017? Everyone's fucking talking about it. It's not innovative, whatever. But it's useful to hear, and it was new to us at some point. But I ended up saying, yeah, I kind of feel like we missed an opportunity to talk about that, because I kind of feel like the actual thing I wanted to say whenever I write that is that you should roll when consequences are interesting. And this human being straight up said, no, that's not helpful. Like, that would not have helped me back then. And that's what made me realize that there is, reminded me, I don't know, that there's essentially different tiers of advice, right? Like, different levels of advice are going to be important to different people at different times in whatever form of development they're going through. You call it like 101 advice versus 201 advice, right? And it made me realize that just because I can restate advice in ways that maybe is stronger, more poignant, more directed, doesn't necessarily invalidate the earlier ways of stating that advice or the earlier intent of that advice. Essentially, just because you can state something in a 201 way doesn't mean that the 101 way is invalid or should be discarded. And that's something I think about when I think about the whole GM advice and the occasional debate about what that means, what you put into like a GM section, whether it's advice or rules, which is its own thing that I'm not going to step into right now. But it made me realize that a lot of what I could say is just, accepting that I don't need to dump all of effectively like the 201 level advice that I kind of want to, like say katanas and trench coats, because the people who would be best served by this chapter are the people who are going to want the more or less the 101 stuff, or at least sort of what I think of that. Or I should intentionally treat that as 201 stuff, that I can essentially say, okay, no, screw it. This is actually a chapter that is intended to be 201. I'm going to more or less expect you to have a lot of what I think is the 101 stuff down, or, be able to pick up on it, right? Anyway, the point there is that essentially we can start thinking about, or at least I should start thinking about, the advice and the constructs that I give to people in terms of, is this 101 or is this 201, or, whatever sort of strata that is useful to think about in that moment. Is this section addressing people who need one tier or another? Am I serving enough people? Am I serving the right people by this? It seems sometimes that maybe the 201 stuff doesn't need to be elaborated as much, because it's just a way of like recontextualizing what's already been done. And maybe the 101 stuff actually needs more text. I mean, think about the amount of stupid verbiage in a fucking GM chapter, and sometimes it's just like, why, dear God, I want to claw my eyes out writing it or reading it. And kind of makes me want to just like always write the 201 version of stuff, because it's going to be like pithy bullet points of like, do this, do that, I'm not your dad, go away. Which sounds like more contempt than I actually have. It's I don't know, it's a struggle. But hopefully, in what's going on to be, I don't know how many drafts of this GM chapter I've been doing for K&T, I am essentially hoping that I can figure out where the 101 advice needs to be, where the 201 advice needs to be, and where I can essentially accept that I can't tell you everything, and I can't even really teach it to you. All I can do is guide you in some way to learn for yourself, because it's a craft, it's an art, it's not a science, it's not something I can give you a textbook about and be all like, hey, do these exercises. It's not chemistry, it's painting, right? Thanks for listening.